Well, it may not be December 20th on the calendar, but it certainly feels like winter is here in Northeast Florida. We've had a few days of frost. We haven't had a deep freeze yet, but some of the things around the garden have taken a little bite, and today we're going to clean a little bit of that up and see what has survived this first round of frost. And if you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Michelle, and this is my meadow, where I garden on about a 1/4 acre in Northeast Florida. I work on gardening in the perimeter of my house because of the way the yards slope down, and it helps us do better water capture throughout the season. But today, I'm starting up front here with our Asian wing bean or dragon bean or corner bean because it does not like the frost and it is done. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out and then work my way through the garden to see what's still growing here when it's 40 degrees outside. The Asian wing bean or corner bean, I've also heard dragon tongue bean, is a family favorite here. We use them in stir fries. We slice them thin and put them right in scrambled eggs. This is a little bit hard. We let this one keep growing on the vine, but they are frost sensitive, and there are varieties. This is actually sort of the size we love to pick it at because of this. It's really nice, it stir fries really well. Something in this range we might do a tempura with, holds up to the heat. But what we have discovered is there are long day and short day, and we just have a variety we bought on Etsy, and we've been very happy with it. In fact, this is my 3rd season with some of it. I started with it in the bed, in the ground, and then I transferred into this bed here, and it really felt like a great way to grow them, though it had a more difficult time really getting started this season. So they grow from tubers, and I am gonna leave the tubers in the ground. I'm just cutting this back, and then eventually I may come out here and put some cover over the bed so that it has a chance to stay warm this season. But I'm gonna leave the tubers right in the ground because they will sprout. Now behind, let's take a look here. Behind there we have some cabbage. Now this was a cabbage seed we bought as a microgreen, but these make some really tasty soups. Not as good in salads because it's a sort of a prickly edge, but very good in any kind of soup that you're doing where you would want some cabbage leaves or some greens. And our family even eats the flowers, so we'll chop something like this up in a stir fry. And this is obviously can take the winter because other than a couple of old leaves, it looks perfectly fine, even in our frosty temperatures. And I did let a couple of the pods dry on the vine, and I will save these for next season to add in more plants in this bed. Sort of like succession planting, fill in the places that didn't work out and keep on growing. Another thing I learned this season is while I really like how this steel trellis looked, the beans really didn't have a way to wrap on them, and so I kept having to tie them up. And so next year, what I'm going to do, and some of you have recommended it and I'm gonna take your advice, is I'm gonna wrap these in a burlap, maybe a burlap ribbon or something, a natural jute ribbon, so that it's a little easier for them to clamp on. You can see I even used little Velcro straps, but it just wasn't enough. And so this was a learning year, transferring from being an in-ground with the trellis into a bed. And so I think that's one of kind of the nice things about gardening is it wasn't a failure. We got to eat the food, but we now know how we can do it even better. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you know I've had some weight restrictions on what I can do lifting lately. And so I have to say this cart that was gifted to me has been a real godsend because it's lighter weight. And if I need to take a rest, I can. So I am really loving this. And I can practice a semi-squat too while I'm trying to get up. Here's another crop that does well in the winter here. This is a pak choi or bok choy. Unfortunately, I can't harvest this because this bed was contaminated, but I'm letting it grow because I just want to see how well it did in the winter, and I would say it's doing fantastic. One of my favorite plants for pollinators, I think I talk about it in every video now, is this African blue basil. And because it's an African blue basil, I would think it's not really going to be frost resistant, but it really does appear. Now, part of that could simply be the microclimates, and I'm working on a video about that. But really, most of it looks great. Only some of the very tips in different areas have a little bit of frostbite. So I'm not covering this on purpose this year. I just want to see how well it'll do. And I'm really not worried about it coming back because I'm pretty darn sure it will. Okra, on the other hand, is not having any of this frost. I see a couple of pieces of okra that I can harvest, but unless it warms up, I don't think this is going to do much more this season. But honestly, I'm going to leave it because it's Florida. And I might cut some of this back, but I'm just going to see how it keeps on growing. And over here, I've got a bell pepper underneath that cloth. Kind of interesting. We're using one of the Epic Gardening tomato cages around that pepper. And I kept it on there because I felt like it makes a great frame for this frost bag. And so it keeps the bag off the leaves and then gives us the ability to protect the plants. Let's pull it up here and see how the pepper looks underneath. It didn't like the cold too much, but I think it's really more about how cold it got because I don't see frostbite. And look, hopefully you can see down this far, there's a flower on still. So I'm gonna water this in and let it keep on going. And I think maybe I should have, we had one warm day. I probably should have uncovered it on that warm day. Here's an example of that frostbite. So here is the African blue basil. Part of it is, but down underneath and in the center, it's doing just fine. So I may take a few cuttings and pot them up and protect them just to make sure, but I just don't think it's gonna kill it, even all the way down in freezing temperatures or a deep freeze. This actually does surprise me because these are peppers, Carolina Reapers and ghost peppers. There's some basil, old basil in here, but they do not seem to have been affected by the frost at all. I don't see any kind of like, or very minimal. There's a little bit of burn there, a little bit of burn all the way at the tippy top, but mostly they look okay. Now over on this bed is the pumpkins, and I tried to cover up what I could, but I didn't want to cover the basil because our friends here, like the bumblebee, like to nap in there. And so I try to leave that open when I can. Let's get a little close-up of Mr. Bumblebee, who is napping. It's always funny to me to come out and find them napping. Once the sun comes out, they start moving around again. So we'll let him just keep on napping. But let's pull this back and see what's going on underneath. So looks like most of the vines are frozen back, and I didn't choose to take them out because they weren't ready yet. Now this is a lot closer than it was. We're starting to get the browning there on the tendrils. But some of these still need a little more time. And so I'd hoped by covering them up, I could preserve at least some of the leaves, which I can see I have. There's leaves right there that don't have frostbite on them. So we're gonna keep these covered up at least for a few more days until the warmer weather comes in this week. And as you can see, the rest of it that was exposed down here, most of that has really succumbed to the frost. When I take a look at the beans, I would say that most of the leaves are gone on the beans. There's a few beans left, so these will need to be pulled out. I'll have to get some help to reach up and pull those out. They're sort of out of my current range of motion. But we still have surprise tomatoes down here that are hanging on. And underneath here is an eggplant that looks like it did pretty good with the frost. I don't see a whole bunch of leaf drop with this one. More of those beans. Looks like the cucumbers took a hit over there. So those can probably come out now. Again on the beans, but these tomatoes have grown up and dropped off, and so I'm gonna let them stay as long as they will. We'll just keep eating tomatoes while we can. I didn't protect this pepper plant, and it's doing fine. Again, I think we have a microclimate In different places around here we have microclimates. Like the sun hits this fairly early in the morning while it's still cool. But you can definitely see time and cold has taken its toll on the bean vines. Now, here's something I didn't really talk about, but I thought was a good idea. And if you guys know better than me, please tell me. This is the main hose for the irrigation system on this side. And so what I did was make sure that I take that off. And then over here, we opened every valve so that everything could drain as much as possible and hopefully create a situation where our different types of irrigation, whether it's the grid or the drip irrigation, hopefully they didn't freeze and bust. And so we'll know more as we keep going forward about that. Now, this doesn't surprise me at all. These are sweet potatoes. Honestly, I don't grow these to get sweet potatoes over here. I grow it until I can figure out what I'm gonna do with this side of the house. Eventually, the plan is that there'll be no grass in here, and then we can just run this down and across. But for now, during the summer months, it keeps it nice and green and helps keep back some of the weeds. This year I didn't have as much time to get out and do weeding, but still the frost now is really sort of taking these sweet potatoes down to their next level of rest and dormancy for winter. And interestingly enough, I don't plan to pull sweet potatoes out of here. I'm simply going to come through when I am able and cut those back and stick them in the compost. Now, back here, I have what I call orchard row, and I keep a bunch of my fruit trees. And this we lost before winter. I need to cut it back down. I don't think it's disease. I think it really is just pure neglect. We don't get as much water here as we do in other areas of the garden when the rain is rolling down. And so it sort of bypasses this one and goes out that way. And so that is just neglect. But with the frost, I don't see, even our natives look pretty good in here. I don't see any of the trees that have frostbite. And part of that reason is location. So if we stand here and we go straight up, we can see that these are just under the edge of a canopy of trees. They get a lot of sun, especially in the summer when the sun comes down, but I really believe it changes the microclimate for these. And in this next video, I have some thermometers coming. This next video, we're gonna walk around and put the thermometers out at different spots in the garden just to show what the differences are during the colder temperatures. And maybe in the summer, I'll do it again during the hotter temperatures. But it'll really be a good lesson for me to see how things are growing and going based on different temperatures. Now, I chose this back here for Orchard Row, mostly because it made sense. It was the last edge of this part of the yard. And the water comes downhill when it rains for the most part. And so it seemed like a great place for it to be, and then up out of the ground because of how hard and compacted the soil is here. So we're gonna keep on measuring this stuff and see how it grows. We'll go ahead and get this little bit into the compost. We put some old bananas in there. There's some old food and stuff. This doesn't probably get the sun amounts that it should, but we're just gonna keep on trying with this and see how it does out here over time. It does keep doing what it's supposed to do. It keeps breaking down because I've had it as high as the top. And so I know that composting is happening. All right, so let's pop up to the other side here and see what we got. The big African blue basil plant's doing fine. I've got avocado covered up over there. Oh, I see a blackberry on right there. This was my first clue that we had some other interesting microclimate things happening. This particular plant has been through several days of frost and it's having different results. And so even from this level up to this level. The first frost only got the bottom. The second frost got the top there. But we just move over a few feet and we don't see frost. And the other thing that you'll probably notice in the bed, this is in the shade, this is already in the sun. And so all of these small features, paying attention to what's happening in your garden, they all matter. Now that we've had some frost, we're very excited to taste our last 2 oranges of the season here. The first ones were good, but I am betting with the colder weather, these are gonna be even better. So by the end of this week, we'll be picking these and enjoying them in the house. Also up here, interestingly enough, is a kaffir lime. This is more of a tropical plant, and I am finding that we're having the same thing here. The microclimate on the patio, the temperature between up here and all the way in the back is almost 9 degrees difference in the morning. And so fascinating opportunities maybe for me to think about my greenhouse again, or doing a small greenhouse up against the house if I choose to do that this season. The loofah and beans are definitely done over here. But again, I know I keep talking about microclimates because I'm fascinated. This okra, which is underneath the protection of the bananas and up against the fence, the lower leaves don't have any of that frost settling on them. You have to get up higher to see that. And then the sweet potatoes over here, relatively unaffected. A few leaves are affected by the frost. All that in the middle is some vines that I cut back and just tossed back in for chop and drop. Now let's scoot around here and take a look at the bananas and see what's going on. I mean, we still have lots of cold weather ahead of us. We are just getting into the season, but you can see the frost has really nipped at the tops of the banana leaves here. And so in time, those are just gonna fold down like some of the ones on the inside here. And we're gonna leave them for the rest of the season so that they provide some additional protection for the plants here. I have an idea for next year. If I can find enough old style Christmas lights, I'm just gonna do this up with Christmas lights so that we can have decor and warmth for the bananas. Not the LED lights, they don't work, but the old school should. Now also, we still have bananas on. We have not taken those off yet. Again, everything's an experiment, and we're just trying to keep on learning about all the stuff that's growing here in our property in Northeast Florida. The lemongrass is continuing to do its thing, and I see that it's going to seed up top. This will need some separation in the spring, but we'll worry about that then. I did discover, interestingly, that you can indeed grow lemongrass from seed. Let me show you what I mean. I may have shown this in another video, but this is an abused plant here that was sitting right next to the lemongrass. And there, look here, that is lemongrass growing right up out of this plant. So I plan to do a little more experimenting with that in the future. Then right here we have mint, which is relatively unaffected by the frost as well. So that's gonna just keep on growing. And then the green onion patch, we don't have it covered up. It's still doing pretty good. But again, it's got a nice microclimate. It's got the dragon fruit bag on one side and the other, probably creating a little bit of a microclimate. As the sun comes up, it gets pretty warm and stays warm for most of the day. And last but not least, I wanted to take a look at our avocado. This is a Mexicola variety. It's supposed to be good down to 25 degrees, but what we have noticed happens is that as it gets really hot in fall, it starts putting on flowers before it gets cold. And so we haven't done so yet. We may cover this up if it's going to be less than 25 degrees, or same situation, we may just come out and put some Christmas lights over it just to sort of help keep it from going into freeze mode right here on the plant. We've been experimenting for a few years about the best ways to sort of practice these things. And so we've tried not covering. That was a disaster. We've covered and it didn't really make a difference, but also we didn't have the late heat that season like we had this season. So again, it's all about discovery in your own yard and figuring out what's gonna work for you. See that fresh little nub right there is flowers and buds. So, considering that we're in the 40s today and have been as low as 33 here in Northeast Florida, I would say we're doing pretty well out here with the things that are still growing on. If you want to see more projects and things that we've been doing around the meadow, be sure to check out this video right over here. And until next time, my friends, remember to drink plenty of water, wear that high quality sunscreen, and as always, have a fantastic day.